Hey y'all, how's it going? How's your Monday going? Today I'm going to be doing a different type of stream and video at that. This is a tribute video for the most amazing guitar player that's ever lived. This is the story about the life and death of Terry Kath. I'm not sure how many other people are going to do their own videos on this, so, but either way, 45 years ago today, in the late morning, Terry Kath passed away. He was fooling around with a gun at a person named Don Johnson. He was at his house, and he was getting on to him about you should put your guns away, and he just put the gun up to his head. He thought it was empty, and that was the end of it. And it was such a waste of amazing talent. But to start, Terry was born in Chicago, and his dad, his dad was quite a musician as well, from what I know. And Terry brought the guitar into the family because, to spite his father, because he didn't like those long-haired dukes with, that played guitar. He didn't think it was real music at the time. But, Terry showed him otherwise, and he became a real rock star. Ever since the time he was in grade 9, he did not put down the guitar. He took guitar lessons, and then he joined a band called The Exceptions, and he played bass. Because they had a guitar player, but he was pretty bad. So yeah, the guitar player for that band was pretty bad. And with him in that band was saxophone woodwind specialist Walt Perezader and drummer Danny Seraphin, who was 15 at the time. And Danny, he had a real sweet R&B backbeat type of thing, and it's like, to this day, it's still amazing. Like, even if Chicago did boot him from the band, he still has the respect of Buddy Rich. And not everyone gets that opportunity. If Buddy Rich respects you, then that's pretty much it, You're good to go. And, he played with them up until the 90s, and when Walt first had the inception of the band, he said, when you give me your hand, that'll be the contract, and the only way out is you ask out or you die. But that didn't quite happen. The first person that they booted was Donnie Dacus, which was a very important part of keeping the band together. And then they kicked out Chris Pinnock. And then Danny. So, yeah, I'm not really sure what happened to Dwayne Bailey as far as that. But, Terry... Yeah, I'm going to talk a lot about Terry. But, this is his video. He had some amazing music, and something that trumpeter Lee Loughnane said was he could play a rhythm guitar part, a lead guitar part, and sing at the same time. And, to this day, no one has been able to do that. He was just an all-around amazing guitar player. And something else worth noting was in the New Year's show back in 1974, when they played the song Wishing You Were Here, he was playing bass. Terry was playing bass, and Peter was playing guitar. And that was something that really caught my eye and shocked me. And, you know, like, everything from his playing to his voice to even his writing and his, like, how sophisticated his mind was, as Jimmy Pankow said. You know, the guy is off the charts, and yet he doesn't appear on any lists of like top 100 guitar players or anything like that. It's just, you know, he's almost been lost in history, and it's sad because he was such an amazing player, and I don't think talent like this should go unrecognized ever. I think it's a crime. Like, the mind of him was so sophisticated. When Jimmy was writing Ballet for a Girl in Buchanan, he showed Terry what he was doing on guitar, and he was like, oh, this is nothing. And once they moved to LA and started playing gigs there, they just happened to play at a place where Jimi Hendrix was hanging out, and they played Purple Rain. And he went up to Walt Parazaider and he said, Walt, you got a horn section that's like one set of lungs and a guitar player that's better than me. Like, Jimi Hendrix doesn't just say that to anybody, you know? And Jimi Hendrix, on the other hand, is very well known. You know, he was also very innovative. Like, when he was bending the strings, like, he was physically, like, trying to bend the guitar, you know? He had, his choreography was on point. And, you know, there's even a documentary called The Terry Kath Experience, which I have watched quite a bit of. And, you know, Jimi Hendrix, he was like, you want to go on the road? And this was back in, I think it was 1968. And when he took them on the road, they were getting the same treatment that POTUS would. You know, with the limousine service straight from, you know, your hotel room or your apartment to wherever you're going. And the private jets. And then he was saying that he wasn't happy doing what he does. And Walt asked him about that. He's like, why are you so unhappy about what you're doing? And he said, well, you're going to know this one day, and you're going to probably know it better than me. You're going to be real successful. You're going to have to spit out hits. People don't like just anything that you do. And it doesn't get much closer to the truth than that, you know. It's the same, not just for music, absolutely not. It goes for literally anything that is being marketed to the public eyes, you know, just like YouTube videos. And like what Davey504 said, he said, if a video does really successful, then that's amazing. But if I post a video, put all this work into it, and it doesn't do well, then that's all my fault. Because you can have 10 million subscribers, but not get 10 million views on a specific video. You know, there are people who can pull that off with a fraction of that. But you have to know your audience and what they like. And Walt just said, I would love to have your problems. I guess because he was thinking that, you know, Robert Lamb had a book of songs like this thick. He was like, oh, we'll never run out. I'm guessing that's what he was thinking. And, he said, well, you will have them. And then Walt said, be careful what you wish for, you might get it. Because it'll either be amazing or it'll be a terrible blessing. And, you know, I've felt the exact same way about some of my videos that I put out, you know, the ones that are, I think are really innovative. Like, putting a USB port to power an elevator button. You know, that video doesn't have a whole lot of views. And one of the things that that just really sticks out to me is just, his voice. Terry had an amazing voice, really pretty. Not like Peter, but it was still really amazing, and it really stands out in Wishing You Were Here. Like Terry, there's no touching Terry, Kath. I know that. Everyone else should know that. Everyone in the band knows that. And once they started becoming really successful, they had a good time. When they were really good, they were really good. And Terry liked it. Terry liked doing the rock stuff, especially I'm a Man. And the other rock songs that they were doing at the time, like Introduction. Introduction was an amazing song that he wrote. He wanted to introduce the band, and that track is just brilliant. All right. And even in songs that he doesn't sing, like 25 or 6 to 4, he has an amazing solo, which was way ahead of its time. Like, he was able to do the wah wah sound, and there were no pedals back then to be able to do that easily. Like, he knew what he was doing. Like, these guys can really read music, and they have the ability to write stuff down with the ability of Jimmy Pankow. Jimmy is another amazing person in the band. Still going this day, even 55 years after the initial inception of the band in 1967. But, once they became more successful and they released Chicago 10, was when Terry started to get unhappy, because If You Leave Me Now really blew up across the world. That song went #1 across the world, but that was not their first #1 single. Their first #1 single was Happy Man. That went to #1 in South America back in 1974, so that was really their first #1 single. Not many people know that, but their first #1 was not If You Leave Me Now, and it wasn't Hard to Say I'm Sorry. Absolutely not. Which I'm sure Terry would not have liked, that they went in the direction of ballads. But, I mean, people liked them. Like, I don't know what would be so bad about doing stuff that's not rock all the time. He started to get really unhappy in the group because he did not want to go to Balladland. And I guess I can understand it to a degree, because he's a rock and roll guitar player. He doesn't want to just do like ballads where he'll probably be playing bass with Peter on acoustic. I'm sure I probably wouldn't enjoy that as much. I'd probably rather be rocking and doing these super sick solos like he does in 25 to 6 to 4 or Question 67 and 68. But he just really became unhappy, and but he'd also just had a daughter, and he was really happy. He was really proud of the fact that he was a dad, and you would have thought that that would have saved him, but he was super heavy on his drug use, and he loved collecting guns. This was a guy that could hunt, he could fish, he could shoot, he could cook, he could drive a car really fast, drive a motorcycle. Like, he could do anything that he wanted. He liked collecting guns and cars and guitars. And, I'm sure if you've watched the documentaries, I'm repeating a lot of the stuff that they say, but he just... And when people talk to the band at concerts, I saw one comment that said, Terry was the nicest guy ever. He was so down to earth. Peter was pretty cool too, and then they said Robert Lamb was a jerk. But now he's not. Robert Lamb is a really good guy. Also very down to earth. I guess he had to take that spot when Peter was booted from the band. It's another person they kind of pushed out. But, Terry started really getting in trouble with drugs, and, it was really sad. It just started eating away at him, and I'm guessing that was, the cause of his death. It definitely led to it, and it was very bad, and it almost tore the band apart. It's amazing that it didn't. But, and the day that he died was pretty fateful day. Being like a week away from his birthday. But he hadn't slept for a couple days. He was hanging out at someone's house, playing with his guns that he thought was empty. Like, he did he had a revolver that was completely empty, click, and then Don was going at him like, hey, you should put the guns away, dude. And then he, takes his 9mm, he takes the magazine out, empties all the bullets, then puts it back. He thought it was empty, but there was still one round in the chamber. And when you've been up for a couple days and you're on drugs, you're not really thinking straight. So he made a mistake. It happens. But this was one that cost him his life. And then he put the gun up to his head and he was like, what do you think I'm gonna do? Blow my brains out? And boom. And even I struggle with the fact that that could have been easily prevented. And if I were to get anywhere close to doing anything like that, I would be thinking about, if I were him, I would have been thinking about the fact that I have a daughter and a family to support. And I wouldn't just F around with guns like that. Because, there's still a lot to experience in this world. And he was starting a solo album that same day. So the way that he died was definitely an accident. He made a mistake. And I'm sure y'all know this. Drugs and guns do not mix. That's just absolutely not. Never in a million years will they be a good combination. And it was very hard news for Chicago and fans all over the world. And replacing him, as you can imagine, was not easy at all. And there are still people that deal with, that struggle with the loss of Terry. Robert Lamb still is not at peace with the fact that he's gone, and it still hits Lee Loughnane, the call that he got saying that Terry's dead. The manager calls up, and he did one of those "are you sitting down" things, and he said, Terry's dead. Which, that's definitely not the way that I would say that someone passed away. One of my managers, he was talking about the documentary that he saw about Chicago. He was like, did you hear about the guitar player from Chicago? He blew his brains out. Which, that's a messed up way to say it, but those were his last words. So, I'm sure that's where he pulled it from. But, to this day, no one has come close to matching the talent that he had. And he had some good songs, too. He was going to put a band together that was going to be called Cook County, which was the which is actually the county that Chicago is in. So that's kind of funny. But he was just going to have guitar, bass, drums, just the basics, and I think maybe keyboardist. I'm not sure. But I'm not really sure how they got Donnie Dacus, but he was really good. He was really good, and then they just decided to kick him out after 2 albums. Um, Hot Streets, that was an okay album. I know people are probably going to get mad at me for saying that, but I didn't really like the Hot Streets album that much. The only song from there that I really like is No Tell Lover. Alive Again, I do not like that song. It's very repetitive, and it doesn't go anywhere. And one thing that I do not like about the band is, they said it's a democracy. The band is a democracy, and I agree with that 100% because they just, they said the only way you get out is you ask out or if you die. And yet they fired a few people. They got rid of Donnie Dacus because he was late for rehearsal one time. They fired Chris Pinnock because he didn't sing. And they fired Danny, which, that's that was not how it was supposed to be. But that was what it came down to for them. And I guess it's what you have to do, but it's messed up. And I don't agree with it. I think it's archaic, and I definitely agree with Jim Guercio about music being the most exceptionally dishonest business. And I'm sure a lot of y'all can agree with me on that. And the the music business is pretty corrupted. But replacing Terry after all that was definitely not easy for them. And Walt Parazater said that to replace Terry, it took 2 guys, and no one will ever truly replace him. Because there's no way you can replace someone like that. There's not another Terry, there's not another Peter Cetera, there's not another Robert Lamb. This is a one-of-a-kind band, and I know there are tribute bands that do match talent, and people say they sound more like Chicago than Chicago, which makes no sense. How can you sound more like a band than the actual band? That makes no sense to me. I don't understand. And, Donnie Dacus, even though he was very short-lived in the band, a lot like Jeff Coffey, he was a very important part of keeping the band together, and if he hadn't gone into the band right then, the band likely would have fallen apart. So he was a very important part of keeping the band together, and he had a really good time with them. And his hair definitely matched the era of the style that the band was going for at the time, especially with Chicago 13, Runaway, and Street Player. Those were amazing songs. And once they got rid of him, they got Chris Pinnock, and they chose him because he was doing a lot of the same things rhythmically that Terry was doing.